Morning, church. I want to start with some good news to share with you. Tatum Perryman, that's Jeremiah and Candace's daughter, was baptized out at Camp Blue Haven this week. She's with us this morning. Kent, would you please stand? Tatum, there she is. Rejoice with her and her decision, and with Jeremiah and Candace. Been quite a few last few weeks, hasn't it? Wow. Before we get into this, let me just make 4 quick observations. In part, I'm going to parrot some of what Mark just said. Don't we live in a remarkable town? Aren't we blessed? Seriously. I mean, the people here have just been fantastic. And the response to this disaster has been amazing. God has really blessed us with some wonderful, wonderful people here. You know, I think it's not accidental that, and I don't want to brag or anything, but FEMA did not set up on the other side of the river. FEMA set up here in Fort Gibson. Okay, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the response of this town and the way that they've handled the situation as they have. I had heard of the good work that Churches of Christ Disaster Relief and Churches of Christ Disaster Response do. I had no idea of how much that would mean here, as it has in the last couple of weeks. Those are absolutely remarkable organizations. I can't tell you how impressed I am with their efficiency, with their love, with the way that they operate. We have been so blessed by what they've done and what they continue to do. The church here, individually and collectively, I have heard story after story after story of wonderful examples of love and service that have been offered individually and collectively by the church here. I believe that you have made God proud in the way that you all have responded to what's gone on. It has been faith-building and amazing. And above all, I just want to thank God. We had no idea of what we were going to be up against, did we? I mean, caught us all flat-footed, caught us all out of the blue. And, I mean, we're praying and we're talking about what can we do, what can we do? And boom, God sends this truck full of exactly what people need here. And other people are giving and caring and taking care of. And, you know, just watching God work has just been amazing and faith-building, and I just can't say enough in praise of Him. Let me just give you just a hint. So Friday, Charlie Dortch, we need to give him a hand. This man has just been amazing. But Friday, Charlie brings me a list and he says, boy, we're out of this and 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 out of this, and we need it. And how are we going to go about getting that? And God says, oh, by the way, I've already answered your prayer. The church at J has stuff left over from a tornado that afflicted them, and they're going to send that this direction. And the Park Church in Tulsa has some stuff that they're going to bring in our direction. And you could almost literally go down that list that he handed to me on Friday and check it off on Saturday, item for item, that God provided exactly what we needed. And he had to set it up before we even knew we were going to need it. Don't talk to me about coincidence either. That ain't coincidence. That's God working. And it has been absolutely amazing. And he continues to work, okay? And he continues to do. And I just am so humbled by the power of God and just struck by what he is able to do and accomplish in multiple ways, and especially through his people. Okay, as I told you last week, when I started this series, working on this series several weeks ago, on the importance of a godly perspective, I had no idea, nor did you, that we were going to encounter what we were going to encounter. And so I literally had this title written several weeks ago, When Trying Times Come. And have they ever? But here's what I want us to do this morning. I want us to go back to the Old Testament, and I want us to look at two characters in the Old Testament who faced trying times, and I want us to look at the perspective that got these two individuals through, and I want you to see the contrast in the two. Because the contrast, as you're going to see, is amazing in how they deal with different circumstances, but how God is always there for them, just as he's here for us today. James 5 verse 17, as James toward the end of the book is talking about faith and trusting God, he will tell us about a couple of Old Testament examples, and one of those is Elijah. And he will write this: Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. Now, I think that's really important, because I think sometimes we forget that these guys were just like us. We look at their courage, we look at their faith, we look at the mark that they have left behind, and their accomplishments and all, and we just kind of, I think we put capes on them and we make supermen out of them. And they weren't. Now, God did amazing things through them because of their faith. But they were people just like us. No different. They struggled just like you and I do. They had their good days and their bad days just like you and I do. And I think that's especially true and illustrated in the life of a man like Elijah. In 1 Kings 18, you find that amazing story of Elijah's victory over the prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth. You remember, Israel is moving in the wrong direction big time. King Ahab, Queen Jezebel reign over them, and they are taking them down a horrible direction spiritually, honoring these gods and goddesses of just horrific beliefs and horrific practices, from child sacrifice to all kinds of sexual immorality and so on. And Elijah's called to step into this mess, and courageously he does. And at Mount Carmel, he puts his life on the line. I like to say that Elijah built an altar up on Mount Carmel, but Elijah put himself on that altar. He did. Because Elijah takes on the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Ashtoreth, and he says, okay, once for all, let's see who God truly is. Who is God? You guys give it your best shot. Let's build these altars out here, and let's see who sends down fire from heaven. And the people of Israel are all just standing, watching, waiting to see. The soul corruption in Israel is appalling. Okay, they've lost their faith and trust in Yahweh. They really don't know who to believe. And so now here's this time, this contest. And so the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Ashtoreth, remember how they plead with their God to send forth fire. They cut themselves and all this, and nothing happens. And then Elijah steps up and he prays. Remember, he's built this altar and he's put the sacrifice on it. Then he's had a ditch dug around the altar, and he's dumped water and dumped water and dumped water on that sacrifice until the area around the altar is filled with water, and the sacrifice is soaked. And nobody can say that this is somehow trickery that's fixing to take place. And God sends down fire out of heaven, and it consumes not only the sacrifice on the altar, it consumes the altar itself. And there's this huge victory for Elijah and for faith and trust in God. And it had to have been just a mountain peak experience for Elijah. And he comes off the mountain, and as so often happens in all of our lives, we go from mountain peaks to valleys, don't we? And he comes off a mountain peak. And what happens? In 1 Kings 19, boy, here's Jezebel, and she hates him. I mean, she hates him. Because he has just blown up what she loves and what she's pushing. And she's going to kill him. The only alternative that he sees is literally to run. And so he runs south, clear out of Judah, all the way down into the wilderness, into Horeb, which is Sinai. And so it seems like he goes back to that mountain where God had originally revealed himself to Moses and the Ten Commandments and so on, okay? And he goes into a cave, and he hides in this cave, and God is miraculously providing for him and taking care of him. But I mean, this man is whipped. He is... What's Elijah's perspective on life at this point? Well, let me share with you some passages. In verse 4, it says, he asked that he might die. God, I give up. Please just let me go. Okay, I've had it. Just let me go. In verse 10, he feels absolutely alone, totally deserted. Nobody stands with him. Even I only am left. And he'll go on to say, again in verse 10, the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant. God, I thought we had it won at Mount Carmel. The people were shouting, the Lord, He is God. Yahweh, He is God. And here we are. And I'm having to run and hide. Jezebel's going to kill me. Was all this for naught? Did I not accomplish anything by this? The people have forsaken your covenant. Now, he's absolutely in despair. In his perspective, all of this has been for naught. All's lost. Here I am all by myself. Now, question. Can this happen to any of us? Can we just throw up our hands and give up in despair? You ever been there? Huh? Ever crawled in your cave? Licking your wounds? And you're just like, God, I just don't get it. Where are you? This just, He's there. He's there. Now, what I want you to see is God's reaction to this. Because what God is going to do is challenge Elijah's perspective. Because, brothers and sisters, bless his heart, and I ain't throwing any rocks at him at all. He's lost perspective. And life can do that. Life can beat you up and cause you to lose your perspective. It can, it does, it has with this man who has a nature just like yours. Okay? What does God do? Well, He informs Elijah, hey, but you're not alone. There are still 7,000, verse 18, who have not bowed the knee to Baal. You think you're alone? You're not alone. You watch the news, you see all this going on today, you ever feel like it's just kind of us and not very many of us? And the whole world's just kind of going to pot, and here we are. Is it real easy to lose perspective? Real easy to feel like you're out there on this island all by yourself? And brothers and sisters, we're not. There are tens of millions of people in this country who believe in God, who want to see His will done, are still striving to live for Him. Okay? Now, is there a challenge out there? Are things moving in the wrong direction? Oh, no question. But there's a bunch of people who have not yet bowed the knee to Baal. And we need to keep that in mind and keep things in perspective that way. God still has important work for Elijah to do. God tells him, hey, Elijah, you're not done yet. Now, Elijah, in his mind, I'm done. God, I'm done. Carmel was it. I am done. And God says, no, you're not. Now, you may think you're done, but you're not done. You still have 2 kings to anoint, and you have a successor to appoint as well. Your work's not finished yet, Elijah. Get out of that cave and finish up what I've assigned you to do. You know, sometimes what we need is what? Somebody to just kind of shove us out of the cave and go, come on. Life goes on. You're not done yet. Get with it. And that's exactly what God does with Elijah. There's a time to crawl in the cave and feel sorry for ourselves. There's a time to lick our wounds, and there's a time to walk out of the cave and go, okay, let's go. We've got stuff we've got to do. Now, notice, does God reward Elijah for his faithfulness? Well, how about 2 Kings 2, where he takes Elijah up into heaven in a fiery chariot? Only 2 people we know of that never saw death. Enoch walked with God, and Elijah's taken up in that fiery chariot. Does God honor that man's faith? He sure does. He appears with Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration. What an honor. Of all the people that God could choose to appear with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, he picks Moses. Well, that's kind of a given, isn't it? Moses and Abraham. No, it ain't Abraham. Moses and Jacob. Nope, not Jacob. Moses and Daniel. Nope, it's not Daniel. It's Elijah. Moses and Elijah appear with Jesus on that Mount of Transfiguration. Need any more commentary about what God thinks of Elijah than that? He'll be the prototype of John the Baptist. In Malachi 4, 5 and 6, right at the end of the Old Testament, it's prophesied, I'm going to send Elijah. And Jesus will tell us in Mark chapter 9, verses 11 through 13, prophetically, that was speaking of John the Baptist. But John the Baptist is likened to Elijah. You talk about a compliment to John the Baptist and a compliment to Elijah. That's it. Brothers and sisters, here's a man just like you and me who takes a licking and crawls into a cave and he's ready to quit. And God says, stop, step back. Let's get a perspective on this thing. Let's understand what needs to be done. There are times when all of us need that same encouragement, need that same perspective. Then Job. Now, in rapid succession, if you're familiar with the story of Job, you know that Job is going to lose his business. By that I mean all his herds and flocks. And I mean, he is the richest man in the East. This guy has tons of stuff. He loses it all. It's stolen from him, taken from him. 10 children. All 10 killed, just like that. And on top of that, he loses his health. He ends up sitting on an ash heap with a piece of pottery, scraping what are apparently horrible boils, sores, all over him. Now, let's be honest. A cataclysm like that would destroy most of us. I can't even begin to think about trying to envision where I would be if that happened to me. But I'm not kidding myself that I might respond as Job did. I hope I would, but man. You have lost, do you understand? You've lost everything. I've watched people lose their business and lose their faith. I've watched people lose a child and lose their faith. I've watched people lose their health and lose their faith. I mean, just encounter one of these and it spiritually destroy them. because they lose perspective. But this man has lost it all. He didn't even have the support of his wife, remember? Hey, curse God and die. Just throw in the towel. Well, he's got his friends coming. Boy, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right? Look at what his friends are going to do to him. I mean, you talk about somebody who has lost it all and who stands alone. It's this guy right here. Now, question. Why doesn't he descend into unbelief and despair? And he doesn't. He doesn't. I believe there's a reason why God said, I have no man like him. And a whole lot of it has to do with his perspective. His perspective is one of faith and of hope. Remember we talked about hope, this new definition of hope that I ran across a while back. I just love it. I love it. Hope is faith looking to the future. And that is exactly what it is. Hope is faith looking to the future. What keeps this man going? His trust in God and his hope. I believe one of the reasons we have the book of Job is to show us the perspective that can get us through the hard times. I mean, that somebody had to go through this boggles my mind. Who's going to volunteer for this? Yeah, wreck my life. Destroy everything I love. Take my health. I'll volunteer. How many people are going to do that? Job goes through this to help us see, listen, I don't care what happens to you. You can make it. You can. Depends on your perspective. Here's our example. Listen as Job articulates his perspective, and this is so important. Job 1:20 and 21. Naked, I came from my mother's womb. Naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Notice, blessed, not cursed. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He is not contrary to his wife's advice. He's not going to curse God and die. He's not going to do it. He's going to bless the Lord. He is not going to succumb to unbelief and despair and selfishness. And as we talked about last week, I believe that that is the basis of the world's perspective. The world's perspective is rooted in unbelief, cynicism. It's rooted in despair. Look at the hopelessness we get inundated with all the time. Selfishness, narcissism. This world's rife with it today. That is not where he goes. That is not the perspective that he has. There's two incredibly important aspects to his perspective, and it needs to be all of our perspective. First of all, he acknowledges that everything he has is by grace. The Lord gives. Brothers and sisters, it's absolutely true. There's not a thing you've got that's not by the grace of God. I don't care if it's your talents and your abilities. I don't care what it is. There's not a thing you have that you don't have by the grace of God. Every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, every bite of food you eat, the home you have, the bed you sleep in, your family, everything you have is a gift from God. You wouldn't have it except by His grace. He understands that. And secondly, and this is tough, this is really important, he absolutely accepts God's sovereignty. The Lord gave, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Does he understand everything that's gone on? No. Remember, we get the perspective he doesn't have. He's living through it. It's not being explained to him. It's explained to us. Okay? Ex post facto, we get to know why he's going through this. He didn't know at the time. He just knows his life's fallen apart. He just knows he's lost everything. And yet he continues to trust God. Continues to honor him despite all that's going on. Why? Right here, early in the book. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He rules, he reigns. Brother, that's right. Why there have to be a flood? The Lord gave, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I don't have to understand. I've got to trust. That's what I'm called to do. That's what you're called to do. To trust in him. You see, when you understand you own nothing, it changes your perspective on everything. Wednesday night Jeff Bezos, right? The founder of Amazon, richest man in the world. Depending on the price of Amazon stock on a given day, we're somewhere around $160 billion. I can't even get my head around that much money. He's worth more than some states. As we talked about Wednesday night, when Jeff Bezos dies and they have his funeral, how much of $160 billion is Jeff Bezos going to take with him? Nothing. I don't care how much you've got. I don't care who you are. When you leave this world, the only thing you're going to take with you is your soul. That's it. Naked came I from my mother's womb. And that's the way I'm leaving here. Naked. Okay? I didn't bring anything with me, and I'm not taking anything out with me. That's the truth. That's the way it is. All we do while we're here is rent. We are temporary tenants, brothers and sisters, and Job understands that. And when you put that in perspective and you quit trying to own everything and understand it is just yours to use for a while, no matter how precious and special and how much you love him or her or it, it's only yours for a while. God gives, God takes away. Blessed be God's name. We've looked at two great men who handled adversity very differently. Elijah goes and crawls in a cave, has a pity party. We do that. But what keeps him going? Faith. Faith. Hope. As we've talked about, that great triad, 1 Corinthians 13:13, faith, hope, and love. That's what we got to build our lives on. That's how we have to center our perspective. In the end, both these men triumphed because of what they shared in common. They shared a deep faith in God. And you can trust him. They did. We should. Root your life in faith, hope, and love. Brothers and sisters, that is a foundation that the devil himself cannot shake. And he can't. That's what a perspective needs to be. This morning, if you, in your perspective and understanding, have come to see how much you need God, and you're ready to give your life to God, you're ready to make that commitment to be born again in the waters of baptism. If we can help you in any way in your walk with him, won't you come? While we stand and while we sing.
As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord. We need to be in your Lord surrounds his people, as the mountains surround Jerusalem. So the Lord surrounds his people. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord.